Alrighty, it is June 4th. It's the PFF Forecast. We've got Soren Petro coming on the show today. We're going to talk the AFC West, do a little MVP odds. It's going to be a lot of fun. We promise also not to encourage anyone to become an AdCare salesman. So those are the promises that I can make to everyone here for the podcast. With that being said, let's rock. I'm not even going to ask you about the Drew Brees thing because it's so comical. But how are you doing, man? Is everything alive and well in Cincy?
It's hot here, which is okay, I guess.
How hot? Because it was like 95 in DC yesterday, and
I'd put it on more of the 85 but humid level.
You're in decent shape. I don't know what I'll just tell a quick story here to get us started. I have been running down towards the White House in the early mornings to check things out.
Oh, and that's what they call it now?
Yeah. And I've been encouraged, man. Like yesterday was the first time I saw actual police barricades about 5 blocks away from the White House. If you've ever been to DC, it goes by letter, and I'm on about R Street and about K Street, you see the barricades. But everything was it was really peaceful. And this was pretty cool, at about 10 p.m. last night, we had the windows open, and I heard Tupac blaring, and it was about maybe thousands of people down 16th Street blasting music and marching peacefully. So that was cool to see. That's my world.
Nice. I told you the story. I've been biking around the Cincinnati suburbs, and I was on the phone with a good friend that I hadn't talked to in a while, and apparently I was being too loud for the person sitting on their porch, and so he told me to shut up, and I told him to fuck himself. It was pretty. It was.
Everyone needs a vacation, I think.
I know. And it wasn't even like. I'm going to blame you because
Makes
it was
sense.
An instinct that I think I learned from you.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I'll take all the blame for that. We were waiting. Soren is going to jump on here in a sec, and we're going to talk obviously about the AFC West, but I wanted to also talk a little bit about the MVP stuff. And a couple of really good articles on the website right now on pff.com by our good buddies Timo and Kevin, looking at not just kind of some of the historical things that go on with the MVP, but also given a simulation, leveraging the simulation that we are going to talk about with the actual division odds, who are some of the better bets. Mahomes is still the overwhelming favorite. We talked about Kyler Murray and how ridiculous he is at 12-1. I actually brought up that I thought Drew Brees was a good bet at over 20-1. I don't feel that way anymore. In fact, I went down and looked at the bottom and tried to find Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston.
I feel like Jameis would be, I don't know.
Not bad, right?
Okay, we said our piece yesterday, Monday. The only thing that I'm going to say is that we as a country have the shortest of short attention spans.
True.
But if this would have happened in Aug 15, I think it might have a significant effect on the actual Saints and playing and stuff. Do you think that it dissipates? You think it dissipates by the time we get to September, or do you think that there are legitimate concerns on that team where there are players who hate their quarterback?
My big takeaway from the whole thing, and I actually think it was Ben Baldwin who tweeted this out, was maybe the fact that Drew Brees is saying basically the same thing he said a few years ago, but the reaction is way different, is a sign that things are progressing in terms of people attacking racism as being bad and getting after it in that way. And so maybe there is a more residual effect. And I would be very surprised if there isn't something still going on.
Are you saying to go bet Tampa Bay then?
Or Matt Ryan MVP odds? I think that's a really interesting one as well. So you look at Matt Ryan, who's 33-1, and if they can win that division, which our simulations have it a little over 10% of the time, like Matt Ryan better be in the MVP conversation, better be in the top 3, because I don't know how else that would happen.
He wasn't even like that in 2016. They were like a 6-4 football team or 6-5 football team, and then he got hot in December, and that's how he won the MVP back then. So it really doesn't take that much other than getting hot at the right time, and I can see that happening.
The Jameis Winston thing is really interesting because for him, he's, what is he, 10,000 to 1? Or sorry, I'm an idiot. Plus 10,000. You would have to imagine that it gets so bad in New Orleans that their hand is forced. And I will just say this: the apology was not what I was looking for in terms of the dissipation that I would expect. So I'm not gonna lie. I saw that and I was like, I'm gonna place a little bet on Jameis Winston.
I did take. Now this is bad, but I did take some Atlanta to win the NFC South again. I can't believe that we're back on the Falcons bandwagon again.
I know it's setting me up for another season. For people that are maybe new to this podcast, the Atlanta Falcons have been a team that grades really well at many, many important positions. And for those reasons, is a bet that we have made far too often. And it always happens. This is always what happens. We convince ourselves on Friday that we can't possibly ignore Atlanta. Sunday morning, say they're playing at 1 p.m. at about 1:20. You just know. And it's not, sometimes they're winning, but you still know. They're winning the game, and then they start trying to salt it away in the second quarter. You're like, I'm out. But the thing about Jameis Winston that's really interesting is it's not like you're just taking a random backup. Jameis Winston is a legit starter in the NFL.
Yeah.
Who would have a huge upgrade in terms of the stability of the organization. And the narrative would be, oh my God, he has changed so much, even if he just throws 10 fewer interceptions, which I think could just happen because of regression.
I mean,
right?
He's a guy who led the NFL in passing yards last year. I mean, this isn't you can.
Did you hang a banner for that, by the way?
I don't know, but I do think here's the thing, does he suck decision tree, and leads the NFL in passing yards is a push to the no side.
I would agree. With you there.
And people think he's a chump, and I just don't. I mean, I don't want to crown him, right? It's a joke that we call him famous and we want him to be, crowned all the time, but he doesn't suck. And I wonder if Saints players would rally around him. Maybe Michael Thomas could venture more than 6 yards down the field.
This is the first thing I did. So I saw the Drew Brees thing on Yahoo. First off, Yahoo Finance existing on Twitter stunned me. I was shocked.
Dude, what about that guy's hair beard combo?
This is what I wanted to talk about. People make fun of you for looking sometimes a little rugged, maybe is the nice way to put it. This dude looked like you went to the mountains without running water for a month and came back. I mean,
Look, I find it impressive that he still has that much hair and there's no gray. Like me, as I said the other day, scoreboard 34, no gray, all my hair. But yeah, it was messed. It was messed up.
So the first, what I was going to say is the first thing I did is I went and looked at Jameis Winston's Instagram and his Twitter to see if he came out with anything strong in support of his teammates. But if they start rallying around him, that would be, I would see an extra bit of motivation from, guys like Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, who, by the way, would be the best, receiving duo that they've had. You throw Taysom Hill in there at tight end. You have Alvin Kamara at running back. You also have, and this I don't think should be understated, a passing game that will allow him to probably get some quicker wins than Arians' system gave him, and a offensive line that should be able to give him the time to wait for the things that he likes to do the most, which are matriculate the ball down the field. So it would be a situation where all of a sudden they're an underdog, a huge underdog in the division, but they have a really strong team, And now they basically just have to beat out the Sweatlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with like this whole new cast of characters. So to me, there's a clear path for him at those odds. I mean, look, those odds are longer than Zeke Elliott, Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Daniel Jones. Michael Thomas is better odds than that. So I don't know. I like that a lot. What are some other ones that are maybe not such a big long shot that you like?
Yeah, when I look at this, I love how it has to designate Josh Allen as the QB, 25-1 on the list.
Yep, you have to.
And who else? I mean, Stafford at 50-1 looks okay. And man, it's tough, right? Like a wide receiver. When's the last time a wide receiver's won it?
It has been over. Geez, I can't even remember. I mean, it's been like 15 plus years, right?
Yeah, it's no. I mean, a wide receiver's hasn't won it since what? Jerry Rice in '87. Is that right?
That would sound right. I can't. Yeah, has to be.
Yep. So it's hard for me to pick. It's hard for me to pick one there. I mean, what is Wentz at 25-1? What does that look like?
Yeah, I thought Wentz and Deshaun Watson at 25-1 were interesting. The reason that I'm intrigued by Deshaun Watson is that that they're kind of an afterthought in that division, and the idea, I talked about this on Monday, that like, you know, DeAndre Hopkins kind of throws them out. With Carson Wentz, there's so much steam on Dak Prescott and the Cowboys that it seems like a perfect recipe for him to kind of come out of nowhere and be great again. It's weird to me that Dak Prescott is 12-1 and Carson Wentz is 25-1. Like, that just seems ridiculous.
Well, especially given that they're about equally.
Right. Like, we could have the debate here and say, like, which one would you rather have quarterbacking your team? We've done that before, and it would be a debate. It's not like, oh yeah, it's for sure Dak Prescott.
And if you look at the you know, the division odds, it's basically the same for those two teams. You look at the Super Bowl odds. I think Dallas is a little bit, so Dallas is plus 110 on BetOnline. Philadelphia is plus 115. I've seen Dallas maybe a little bit more favored at times. But, you know, you got to think the path to the Super Bowl is to win the division. And if they're equally likely to win the division, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, what's the other – like if people are going to try to spread blame on the offensive side away from the QB, don't you think that's easier to do in Dallas?
That's the whole thing is, like, I actually think Dallas has a situation that is, if they're successful, there are more places to go, oh, it's Mike McCarthy. Oh, it's these three wide receivers. Whereas in Philly, people are way less into the Jalen Reagor edition than they are CeeDee Lamb. So I'm with you there. Stafford sticks out to me as well. I actually don't like Jimmy G is plus 4,000. So is Jarrett Stidham. Like, that's disrespectful.
Well, the Jimmy G was the same thing. I mean, like we had thought about him as a bet for the MVP in the Super Bowl just because if things go right. I mean, San Francisco's the same thing. Like, let's say San Francisco's the highest scoring offense in the NFL this year, which is certainly a possibility given what they were last season. Who's the MVP of that team?
That's the point. Is
because they're not giving it to Mostert, or they're not giving it to Tevin Coleman or Jerick McKinnon. They're not giving it to one of those wide receivers. It's
right. I mean, George Kittle. You know, that would be.
Yeah, but like a tight end is even more like, I hate to say this, but I think, don't you think Kittle's peaked at some level?
Well, his peak was just the highest graded season ever by a tight end. So it's
only going to go down. Like, to me, it's only going to get down for him, even if he's still great. And so then Jimmy G
has a natural place to go where people will go, oh wow, and they would take note in a way that they haven't before. And I'll point this out about Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's got a lot of things going for him. Obviously, the San Francisco 49ers are going to be on prime time a ton this year. there's the defensive regression bit, which we talk about all the time, which is defense is just less stable than offense. And so we would expect the defense, even if, maybe health regresses a little bit, right? They're not as good. So if the Niners are successful and the defense regresses, it's because the offense picks things up. He's got Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan is a mastermind. So he has all these things working together. He's a good-looking dude on the team that America is going to watch continuously. Like, if he doesn't have to have the same success that random unknown quarterback in a place that never makes it on national TV has to have for people to immediately go, oh, wow, we've got to look at Jimmy G. Not to mention that he's got some of those things that I think people will overweigh, which is I spoke about the handsomeness, not going to, bury that one into the ground, but like the ability to hang tough, make throws on third down under pressure. Like we saw him do that in that 5-game sample.
Look, his ability not to say something freaking stupid about protests is probably like his biggest thing right now.
Yeah.
Do you think, look, there's absolutely no way that Jimmy G has the dumb opinion that Drew Brees, people will say, what's the difference between Jimmy G and like Kirk Cousins? What's the difference between Jimmy G is not as talented as some of these other players, but why do people rally around him? I can guarantee you he has the locker room. I can guarantee you that in times of struggle, he's got people's back. Like there's something to that. I don't think we do the best job of measuring. I can guarantee you Jimmy G is saying all the right things right now.
I mean, Emmanuel Sanders might be coming back. Who knows? I watched Emmanuel Sanders talk about Jimmy G on TV. If you haven't seen this, you can check it out. I forget. I think it was on ESPN somewhere, maybe First Take. And they were like asking him about, was he something around like, is it Jimmy's fault? Did he go to New Orleans so he could get a quarterback that wasn't going to, choke or whatever? And he was like, man, I'm not like Jimmy's my guy. And for a guy that went to a new team to say that, I think it says a lot. He's been one of the most – he hasn't thrown the ball downfield. That's the thing. When he has, though, our ball location charting has him as one of the most accurate guys in the league. He doesn't throw a ton of uncatchable passes. It's really about those, like, brain-dead, turnover-worthy throws that he occasionally makes to linebackers. But this is his second full season with Kyle Shanahan. So we talked about Matt Ryan a second ago. I like Jimmy G, although I might not bet it so that I don't jinx myself.
Yeah, well, we've seen we've seen this like before, where a quarterback. I mean, Matt Ryan. How much? So here's a good question to have while we're waiting for Soren to come on. What's the difference between Matt Ryan and Jimmy G?
Matt Ryan's done it before.
Okay, but what
he's put it
going
together
into
for a whole season.
Going into 2015, 16, what's the big difference? Because what we've seen with Ryan the last few years is, you can put up really good stats. And I think he's better, but I don't think the gap is that much. Like, and we're talking about a season where Matt Ryan had like 9.5 yards per pass attempt.
Yeah, I mean, so going into that 16 season, he was coming off of 2 top 10 graded seasons the season before. There he is. Yes, he made it. I was worried we were going to have technical difficulties.
This was more. I think this was more of a timing issue on my fault. So,
we get to blame Eric for something.
There's a big difference between AM and PM. And when you reach out to somebody and you confirm 9P Central. Yep.
Hey,
okay.
Look, Soren, the hardest thing for me was getting the Central time zone and the Eastern time zone aligned, and I missed the P. I'm sorry. So
a man
who get to drag me just a little bit.
Yeah, a man who routinely uses the term, the calculus of what's going on here, and the big brain can't handle the simple tasks.
We're going to get a counter here, Soren, for today's pod, which is how many times does Eric say force multiplier or fat tail, which are his 2 favorite things to say that I don't think anyone still knows what he's talking about. But that makes me so happy to hear that it was Eric's fault and we can make fun of him for this whole podcast for messing up AM and PM. We're off to a great start. How are you doing? How's everything going in Kansas City?
Yeah, doing well. I was, about 5 minutes ago, putting groceries into my mother's car.
Nice.
But I left her. I said, I got to go. So I dropped the milk right there. I said, Eager's texting me. He made a mistake. I got to run. So my mom is just sitting in a grocery store parking lot right now with the milk running down the street. As, whatever it takes, man. You guys are big time.
Eric will be paying you back for this for quite some time. We want to talk about the AFC West. I actually have we usually do kind of these icebreaker questions, but taking a key from you, who are, in my humble opinion, one of the best at doing sports radio that you can find. I'm saving those interesting questions for the end because that's what you do. So I'll make you feel at home.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I would say, as I'm sitting here looking, I would not come on normally to do a podcast, a video cast where I'm going to talk about the Chiefs wearing a Chiefs shirt, unlike the ultimate homer. But when you're racing in the house to get logged in, you don't have time to be let me change shirts.
That's an interesting thing because you grew up in Kansas City and then left to go to Syracuse, right? Went to Syracuse for school. You had some time in Vegas, but you've mostly been a Kansas City guy.
Right.
And what I think is really great about your show is that you're a Chiefs fan. You don't mince words. You don't hide it at all. But you have like access to people. You have like the best information about any person that covers the team. You're a fan, but you're objective. Like fans can go one of either way. They like pom for the team, or they hate the team like so much that they like the team has disappointed them so much that they just hammer them all the time. Where you do a really good job, I think, of just like playing it like down the middle. And, as a Chiefs fan myself, like when I would talk to you on the radio, it's like there's been so many things that you've said that I'm like, oh yeah, that is really true. And I don't understand like Andy Reid. Like I didn't realize how brilliant Andy Reid was until one time you just laid it out for me. I'm like, oh, that's something I've totally missed for the last 3 years of my life.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Andy Reid was a complete and utter buffoon until there was about 6 minutes left to go in the Super Bowl, and then he figured it out.
Yeah, right.
If you read the pundits, if you've made your career covering the NFL and you've spent 10 or 12 years writing about how Andy Reid can't figure out the clock and Andy Reid doesn't know how to win the big games, then something must have changed, because you couldn't have been wrong for 12 years. It couldn't have been that he was building up, good quarterbacks into making them look like they were great quarterbacks. And I'm a Syracuse guy, as you mentioned, so I love me some Donovan McNabb, but I think his career arc without Andy Reid, when he was – and I love everyone's – well, he was washed up then. He was 33, right? He was 33, and he fell off a cliff. And he didn't go to a moron, right? He went to Mike Shanahan, for crying out loud, and he fell off a cliff. So, those are the things I think, when you get the day in, day out of just focusing on one thing, of an inch wide and 100 miles deep. On a team, you grind through number after number after number after number, and you're like, well, wait a minute, this guy's pretty good. And then you watch every game and you realize with 1:27 to go and one timeout, why didn't he go down and get the touchdown that would have tied the game? And it's because, Alex Smith didn't take the 25-yard out. He tucked the ball and ran for 4 yards and burned off 40 seconds. Like, that wasn't Andy Reid's game planning. There was a receiver there. It's just Alex Smith can't make that throw, and he knows it. So he runs, gets a first down, but you burnt half your clock. And that's the kind of thing that I think, unless you watch play in, play out, and focus in on one team, I don't think those one team exclusively.
We're already through Eric's first attempt at making it up to you for messing up AM and PM with that lovely bit there.
Well, also my
you are
I'm
also
wearing a Chiefs shirt, so I'm a solidarity with Soren here.
Okay, so let's talk about the AFC West a little bit, and I'm going to try and avoid you guys talking about the Super Bowl too much because it's a little painful for me. So I want to focus on 2020, and the Chiefs are a massive favorite. They're minus 350. In the betting markets. The other teams are basically all clustered together, the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Raiders. So, Soren, you see how much the market loves the Chiefs. This has a feeling of Patriots AFC East of years past. Does this make you nervous, or are you just so confident because of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid that you kind of just brush it off your shoulder?
It doesn't. It does make, what makes me nervous is having won the Super Bowl, right? That's the new variable here.
Oh, is that what makes you nervous?
It makes me happy, right? But then I thought we were moving on to 2020. I didn't know you were going to drag me back. But we can talk about that game if you want. How about that last 6 minutes? That was sorry, I'm sorry, George. I kid because I care.
I know.
As you know, I spent a lot of time defending Mike Shanahan in Kansas City. Because a lot of people wanted to, or Kyle Shanahan, excuse me, because a lot of people wanted to throw that game all at his feet, and I thought that was ridiculous. But anyway, we can talk about that later. You and I on a phone chat. But in regards, the reason I think that the Super Bowl, this is a variable that Andy Reid has never handled, right? He's never come back with the ultimate success. And in Kansas City, there's a lot of victory parades that the band's back together. They've got everybody. It's 20 of 22 starters, and one of the starters, was a guy they picked up midstream to play left guard. And you guys have pointed out many times, it's probably the least important position that's out there. The other starter, Fuller, was a guy that really wasn't a starter until Thornhill went down. So there's a feeling that hey, we're going to run this back. That's the phrase that the team is using, run it back. And there's no reason, why would anybody be able to catch this team? They're the best team last year. Everybody's back, so they're the best team this year. And just assuming that Chris Jones is back, which I'm not convinced is definitely going to happen still, just because I think he may hold out and may be a vicious holdout, the kind that drags into the season. Complacency is real. There's a reason why nobody's won back-to-back Super Bowls since the Patriots did it in 2003 and 2004. And the Pats are the only team that's even really kind of taken a run at it. The Seahawks came pretty close, right? But I think that was a team that was hungry. And, normal Super Bowl teams, we looked up, I think in the last 20, 25 years, teams that have gotten to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years have averaged 6 or 7 new starters. And, everyone's viewing the fact that the Chiefs don't have new starters as a good thing. And I think it might be a bad thing because those 6 or 7 new starters are hungry. They don't have the ring. They didn't win the championship next year. So my fear would be that it's those new starters that inject the lifeblood, that have the passion and the fire to go get that first ring. And the Chiefs don't have that. Everybody, when they get into the huddle, they're going to look around and everybody's wearing a ring and everybody had a great offseason. And just complacency set in, because I think you do have to have that edge to play at a high level in the NFL.
This is a great question. We actually talked about this a little bit on your program a few weeks back. Who is the guy on that team? Because I think it was Belichick and Brady for the Patriots who had the edge that just never went away. Andy Reid, at least from the outside, will not inspire edginess, right, with people. And I'm curious, you obviously know him better than most everyone out there that's listening. Will he bring that edge? Is that Pat Mahomes? Who is it within the organization that would be able to get them back there?
All right, so couple guys, right? Pat Mahomes, I think, is that guy. I mean, he is working. I think he does eat, breathe, and sleep football. I mean, the quote Scott Pioli used to use.
Well, and ketchup.
Yeah, he like ketchup. Hey, don't hate on ketchup. 1 part fry, 1 part ketchup is a good ratio in my world.
No.
But listen, Scott Pioli used to talk about the process, right? That and then he'd talk about football being important. Is football important to this guy? And I think football is very important to Patrick Mahomes. So I think the easy answer is to say Patrick Mahomes. But I think it's got to be more than just Patrick Mahomes. And I think we don't know. So if it's not him, I think Andy Reid, there is a side of Andy Reid. Like, listen, when you have his press conferences, he makes weight jokes about himself and gives kind of coach speak answers. You got to kind of dig a little bit to find some substance a lot of times in the things that he's saying, because he tries to be so generic, not tip anything off, not, he's very much about let's keep the team in-house. Like, problems are handled in-house. And he walks that. He doesn't just talk it. He's out front. He's not selling his players out publicly. Every loss is his fault, right? Every win is everybody else's fault. He plays that to a T. But there is a side. You'll see when he gets a question he doesn't like, and he gives you like a little sideways look. And even as a media member, that he's upset. And he kind of glares at you, and he'll shut it down. And he's lost his cool a couple of times in Kansas City. I talk to guys, and they say, listen, that side's there. It's behind closed doors. Andy Reid can take it up a notch, and he can get in your face. And when he does, it is different. It's not the principal coming down on you. It's your grandfather coming down on you. And he has that grandfatherly love. And I think it's clear that he is more of a player's coach than a disciplinarian. I would never try to sell you that he's a disciplinarian, but with his resume and with the way he treats people, when he comes down on a guy, they listen. And I think Andy Reid's a guy that is going to coach till his health ends it, a Bear Bryant type of deal. Like, he's going to coach right up. And he's like, oh, Andy Reid retired. And then you find out, oh, he passed away 3 months later because he had an illness or something. I mean, I think he does eat, sleep, and breathe football. And then the other guy I would point to that has a lot of respect in the locker room, and this is one that I know will pain you guys, and I get it. And I wasn't for this move either, because I'm about, you know where I'm going. I'm about cap management. I'm about the dollars. I believe in coverage. You've sold me on the coverage over the front seven. I've watched the Patriots interchange that front seven, but Frank Clark does bring an edge and bring an intensity, and he does all the little things. I think one of the things that I've noticed from talking to guys in a locker room, there is a tremendous amount of respect for a guy who does the job that isn't shown up in the stats and doesn't result in getting paid. Frank Clark sets the edge against the run. And I think when you talk about edge defenders, if you want to look for a guy that's going to carry swagger in the locker room, guys who set the edge are a big deal. Justin Houston can set an edge. Number one, it shows you're physically tough. It shows you're strong. It shows you'll stand your ground. And it shows you'll give yourself up. When you set the edge, you're probably not going to make a tackle. There's no TFL, right, which is one of the things your agent's going to talk about when it comes to getting paid. You set that edge and you turn the run inside. You give other guys a chance to get the tackles, make the money, and it's something that's important to stopping the run. And Frank Clark is a guy who can get after the passer. He's relentless, but he also does the little things and the dirty work. And I think he is a guy, he and Tyrann Mathieu, who I think everybody knows about. I don't think that side of Frank Clark is known about, the kind of respect he carries in that locker room. I think Tyrann Mathieu is one of the most respected players in the entire National Football League. He would be the other guy. But Frank Clark does have an intrinsic value, which is hard for math-based people like us to try to put a value on.
No,
what if I told you PFF graded every player on every play? Eric,
I'm quite aware, being that I have the big ticket subscription, right? The full-on subscription. I use the grades every week.
I think it's interesting, right? Because we had 2018, we had the Chiefs as the highest graded pass rush unit in the NFL. Ford, Houston, Jones would get to the quarterback really quickly. But it didn't result in great defense because they couldn't cover and they didn't do the right things. And I agree with you that Matthew covers up so much. But you watch some of the games and you look at, I think of that AFC Championship game against the Titans when Tannehill swerved in the backfield like 7 times. Clark didn't win that rep. He didn't win the rep when he got the game-winning sack against Garoppolo. But Spagnuolo,
he didn't win the rep when he got one of the clinching sacks against Deshaun Watson, where he looked almost like a lock of hair circling its way around.
He didn't win that rep. And it was interesting because, like, Ford, I think Ford specifically was just kind of more soft, and then he would win reps, but then if he didn't get to the quarterback, he'd kind of quit. And whereas Clark wasn't winning reps at the rate that Ford and Houston would, but then they got Spagnuolo and they got Matthew and they got Thornhill and they got Ward, who could cover just incrementally better than a season ago. And Clark was relentless in getting to the quarterback in reps that he didn't win. And I do think that there's something to that in terms of just like, and the fact is he played with 2 like really bad elbows last year. He was hurt most of the time. And I do think that does give rise to more respect and more of a buy-in than having guys who are like more concerned about their sack total or, whatever. I do think just anecdotally that makes a lot of sense. I also think on that team, Travis Kelce and Mitchell Schwartz are guys who I don't think are just satisfied with winning 1 Super Bowl. I could see Sammy Watkins being satisfied with winning 1 Super Bowl.
Oh, stop it!
I can't see a guy like Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, being satisfied with winning just 1 Super Bowl. So I agree with you that there is an issue. And I didn't even thought about that, where you think about if you churn 5 or 6 starters, those guys are hungry, and that's going to be different than churning 2 starters. That's a really good point. But I think the remaining guys on the Chiefs, the leaders on that team, I think are probably not of the rest on their laurels ilk.
I always think of Andy Reid and I as having one key similarity in that we're always hungry. And then the second thing that I should point out that Eric mentioned is having two bad elbows is the same excuse that he's used in basketball for the past year. So he would know. I'm giving him a hard time. Eric actually plays through injury quite a bit and refuses and doesn't like to talk about it because he knows how much that angers me.
Yeah, listen. Okay, so you're not going to get any complaint about anyone, putting some injury fronts out there. I am the epitome of the fat old man here.
So here's a question that because I think the other teams in this division are interesting. I'm not sure that they're scary, but they're interesting. And I might ask this in two ways. So like this year, but also just going forward, who's the team that you are most scared of?
And that's another reason to say, okay, is this complacency setting in? Because to me, the similarity you mentioned, the AFC East and the Patriots, who was the quarterback that was going to scare Tom Brady? I mean, I love the analysis. I love the breakdown. I love grinding through, what DN's better than another DN or guards or whatever. Everybody matters. Some matter more than others. But in reality, I almost feel like it's, unfortunately, I can give you the 5 or 6 teams that are in it for the Super Bowl, and it's the 5 or 6 quarterbacks that you think can win a Super Bowl. And so, can the Chiefs lose in a year? Yes, they can. Right? Can you have a magical season? Yeah, Matt Castle and the Kansas City Chiefs won the AFC West in a year that they went, I think it was 2-4 against the division because injuries lined up. Castle got together with Charlie Weiss.
Weren't the Raiders like 6-0 in the division that year and still somehow in like Raiders fashion went like 8-8?
Yeah, I mean, so things happen, right? So can I see a scenario where injuries pile up for the Chiefs? They're maybe a little complacent and the schedule plays harder than it looks, where it plays down for somebody else. They don't get hurt and they grab a 11-5 to the Chiefs 10-6 division. Yeah, that could happen. But the big picture is that year after year after year, Patrick Mahomes plus Andy Reid equals they're the favorite. And they are going to win way more than they lose. And right now, against the coaches that are in here, Andy Reid has never been beaten. Patrick Mahomes has never been beaten by this coaching staff. And whether it's Tyrod Taylor or Derek Carr, Drew Lock, if you said who scares you, I don't think the Broncos team is ready to win this, but Drew Lock is the one guy that there's lots of ceiling left for. We've seen him have a great game. And does that click in year 2? And does he play like a Phillip Rivers in his prime caliber quarterback? Well, if you put some pieces around that can win. And the Chiefs have a down year, or there's going to be a cap reshuffling that happens in 21. That's probably the year that they're more likely to be gotten. But the Broncos are the team that scares me because I don't know what Drew Lock is. The Chargers have defensive pieces, yes, but I don't see it from the quarterback position. The Chiefs are going to play the Chargers, and twice it's going to be the last 5 minutes, and it's going to be a one-score game. And who you got? I got Patrick Mahomes. I don't have Justin Herbert, and I don't have Tyrod Taylor. And frankly, I think Anthony Lynn is a solid coach, but I don't have Anthony Lynn against Andy Reid either.
Yeah, I think you bring a good point with Denver. And obviously Drew Lock is a Missouri kid, so a lot of you guys are a little bit torn on wanting to see him succeed, but also Denver. The thing with I think Denver could very well be 2020's version of the 2018 Bears, the 2019 Bills, where you have a second-year quarterback. And to Denver's credit, they have a lot of pieces. I mean, Vic Fangio is a great defensive coach, and that's probably as Chiefs fans know, is one of the most important things to building a defense is to have a coordinator who has a clue. And then on offense, they got Cortland Sutton's really good. Noah Fant they got in the draft. They got Albert O in the draft. They got the second Jerry Jeudy in the draft.
He's decent.
Philip Lindsay's a good running back. They drafted Dalton Risner last year out of Kansas State. They have the makings of a decent offensive line. There's a situation where this time next year we're telling all these Broncos fans the same thing we're telling the Bills fans, which is like, look, congratulations, you made the playoffs last year. Your quarterback still isn't very good. Pump the brakes a little bit. Your division still has Patrick Mahomes. But in 2020, what that means is that there's some optimism, I think, in terms of those three teams. Like, people are talking about the Chargers, people are talking about the Raiders. I think the Broncos are that team in the AFC West that can go 10-6 and make a playoff run, just based upon some of the fundamentals that they have.
Yeah, and I am, and right, you're right. Listen, and Drew Lock's a Kansas City kid. He's from Lee Summit, one of the suburbs here. So trust me, it's one of the most painful things ever to see that guy get drafted by the Denver Broncos. But I do think that ceiling's there. That you could be sitting here a year from now and talking about Drew Lock being one of the elite quarterbacks, right? Patrick Mahomes was a guy that when he entered year two, and I know we got a little flavor of Drew Lock where we got nothing of Patrick Mahomes other than a throwaway game with 20. His rookie year, the last game against the Broncos, that didn't matter for the Chiefs. But with Drew Lock, I think it is possible. Full season as a starter, but I think the potential is there that we say, hey, wow, 35-12.
Yeah.
Pat Shurmur, too, has also been an offensive coordinator that, if you look at the past few years, I mean, he took Minnesota with Case Keenum to the NFC Championship game as an offensive coordinator. And the last 2 years, I know that he got a bad rap in New York, but that Giants offense was in the top half of the league in 2018. And last season, even with the rookie quarterback, you look at Daniel Jones's numbers, he didn't grade well, but he put him in position to put up some stats. And they moved the football okay for having a rookie quarterback. I think Pat Shurmur is an underrated acquisition there in Denver as well.
The one thing that I'll point out about Drew Lock's ceiling is that your ceiling, one of the quickest ways to take your ceiling and drop it down is to not be able to make consistently accurate throws on the kind of easier throws, right? The ones that you should make. That's actually, for my money, what makes Patrick Mahomes so incredible is he just doesn't miss. And so his floor is like most people's 80th percentile. And for Drew Lock, he's got to improve that component. That's something that I think, as we talk to quarterbacks and we look at the data, is harder to improve. But it also shines a light. You mentioned the Chargers. And I thought the way that you talked about the Chargers and the Broncos was so interesting, because you're like, the Chargers have a really good team too. Like, they have a ton of talent. Both these teams have a ton of talent. One of them has a quarterback that at least people are, somewhat optimistic about. Justin Herbert, I feel like, is in maybe the same boat, actually, where he could come in and he has a lot of talent around him. I think we're more skeptical of him because we haven't seen him in an NFL game at all. But there are some components there that are similar to Drew Lock, where, look, the accuracy isn't there, but some of these bigger plays are. And I think that could be interesting. The Raiders are the team that all these teams have win totals of 7.5, and the Raiders, it seems to be the one that we are least confident.
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask you something about the Chargers before you move off the Chargers.
Yeah.
Because, right, general managers, we can say, I love this quarterback or this quarterback stinks, and it doesn't matter, right? It goes off into outer space and nobody ever hears it again, right? We talk around and give you reasons why, the guy is what he ends up being. General managers are going to be fired based upon not getting it right. Like, what do you see in Justin Herbert, right? Because Tyrod Taylor's a guy that if you put talent around him, he'll go 10-6 for you. You put the 2000 Ravens around, yeah, he could go 13-3 for you. As long as you're leading every game, you don't ask him to go win the game, pull it out of the bag with 120 to go, then Tyrod Taylor can win you games that way. Justin Herbert's the guy that would seemingly give you the ability to do more, right? So you've got an Alex Smith-like quarterback, and I watched that for a while. That's good, but he's not going to pull anything out of the fire. He's just going to win you what your scheme wins you, what your talent wins you. He won't screw it up. And by the way, game manager is not a negative term, but that's what he is.
Yeah.
But Herbert's a guy you hope has upside. And the one thing to me, if I were to give a quarterback, so I'll call my shot and we'll see if I'm right. You can call me up and say I'm an idiot. Justin Herbert is Blaine Gabbert. And Blaine Gabbert was a guy that would take his eyes off the rush. If there's a way to quantify how many times a guy looks at the rush, right? The rush is always there. It's always coming. And we see it more from guys who scramble. We see him, take off and run. And it's like, well, he didn't stick with it. But just even taking your eyes off the rush. And Blaine Gabbert was a guy that at Missouri, when everything was blocked, he looked really good. And when the rush came, he had problems. And I can't tell you I've watched every Justin Herbert rep, but every time, you watch the cut-ups of here is good plays, here is bad plays. All the good plays, clean pocket.
Yep.
All the bad plays, traffic. And I'm not even saying pressure, just traffic. Yeah. And you have to be able to complete passes with traffic. And that's what Patrick Mahomes does so well. You know, everything's flying around him, yet he can still deliver the football because his eyes are down the field.
It's like how they say, you know, in the NBA, a guy's open if he has just a foot of space.
Yeah.
And like people will sometimes be surprised when a PFF say, actually, that's a clean pocket. Like in the NFL, clean pockets don't look, you know, they're not this pristine like bubble. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
You've got to be able to make throws where things are a little tighter. And I think that's a great point. I think that comparison is probably a little scary for the 7 Chargers fans out there.
Can I amend it just a little bit? Because I thought, wow, that was I think that's a great comparison. I think he's kind of the average of Jake Locker and Blaine Gabbert. Okay. Same draft. Because when you looked at, and I don't know if I'm making this any better for the Chargers fans, but you watched Herbert against Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, and I don't know, you may have had a couple $100 on it. I don't know. But anyway, so you watch him, and they're grinding out this win where their defense plays amazing, and Herbert can't complete a ball to save his life, but what does he do? He runs for like 3 touchdowns, and everybody's like, oh, he saved the game. And that's exactly what Locker did in Washington, where we're like, we overlook the fact that the guy can't hit the broadside of a barn when it's like a normal NFL throw, but he can run, so then his teams like had some success. And so that's why I kind of also think about Jake Locker too, which, God, that guy, you know, I agree. Like, where there's an article that I wrote right before the draft looking at our projections saying, like, let some other team take the risk on Justin Herbert.
Right.
And so when I look at that team, I think you're right, Soren. I think if they committed to Tyrod Taylor for 16 games, they could probably win 9 or 10 games, given the supporting cast around them, although their offensive line stinks, but like all that kind of stuff. But Tyrod Taylor has always been this quarterback that teams, even when they're doing well, have wanted to bench. So the 2017 Bills, that team made the playoffs. That was the first playoff team for the Bills since 1999. And they started Nathan Peterman on purpose ahead of him one time. He threw 7 picks or whatever that was. And then they had to put him back in. Like, do you think, like, let's say the Chargers are 4-2, they're winning ugly, Chiefs are 6-, like something like that, where they're 2 games back and they're like, we need a spark, even though we're in it. They put in Herbert and he's absolute butt. Like, what happens then? Like, that team's 7-9 then.
Well, I was going to say, I see actually what the Broncos did with Drew Lock was they waited, right?
He was hurt. That was the big thing, right? He had like a broken wrist or whatever. But.
Okay, but the point was that they didn't take him at 6.
Oh,
and
I
keep saying this about the Chargers. Like, that's what makes this so much more. There's such a bigger microscope on this because, look, you had an opportunity. You could have brought in Cam Newton. You could have brought in Jameis Winston, and you could have taken one of the great tackle prospects at 6. You could have taken
Jalen Hurts in the second round.
Right. And you could have taken one of the great wide receiver prospects at 6, and we'd be talking about the Chargers now. Like Soren, if they had Cam Newton and pick your tackle or pick your receiver, like I think you'd be talking about the Chargers a little bit differently, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, listen, I'll never fault anyone, and you guys talk about this all the time on the forecast, and I won't fault anybody in investing in the quarterback position, right? Was Alex Smith the guy that was going to win the championship for the Chiefs? I mean, probably not. Like I said, the 2000 Ravens, the 02 Bucks, those are real. The whatever it was, the Flacco Ravens, you know, those Super Bowls did happen. You can get there, but it's not what you're striving for. At some point, the season starts and you got to go to battle with what you got, right? And we'll you know, you get another draft and another free agency next year to keep trying to get better. But, you know, Tyrod Taylor is the guy that every losing coach wants to get his hands on. And every general manager wants to immediately replace, and because he's not the goal, right? But he does advance you down the field, and I think if the rest of the AFC West is looking at the Chiefs now and saying, okay, what do they do? Andy Reid came in and he immediately upgraded the quarterback position. He got better to Alex Smith. They looked around. They brought in young quarterbacks, right? But they didn't go with a first round pick. You know, they just kept taking shots with the Georgia kid Murray and you know a couple little guys, little moves here and there. They were looking around, but then when they had a chance, and whoever the kid was undrafted, the 6'6" kid from Tennessee that had a rocket arm was a big recruit. They kept him around for 4 years with mystery injuries, trying to get him over the hump. But would take him 1-1, right? If he doesn't jump at you, that we would take him 1-1, then you've got an issue, okay? Because you already see faults. And I think, Herbert is a guy that no one would take 1-1. Herbert was a guy they took because they had a quarterback need and he was the best one that was there. The Chiefs would have taken Patrick Mahomes 1-1. If they had the first pick in that draft, he was going number 1. And now that seems brilliant, right? Or it seems obvious, I guess I should say. But at that time, Mahomes was a guy with no footwork and a loose cannon and a turnover machine, even though a lot of the just ground level stats didn't say that. But the Chiefs were committed. They said, no, we see him as this next level talent, and we're going to go get him. And there's nothing about Justin Herbert that says 1-1, right? Yeah. You took him because you felt like it was time to address the quarterback position. Now, maybe they end up being right, but I don't know. I think the Chargers had to convince themselves to go down that road, and I don't see that you already know there's a lot of ceiling that's gone there if you weren't willing to move up and get him. If you knew he was good, you were in a position, you traded up to get a linebacker, for God's sake. Right. So you were willing to move assets to get up in the draft. But you didn't go up and get the quarterback, right? Like you're in a frisky mood. Let's make some things happen. And you don't go up and get what it takes. Now maybe we'll find out that they pushed hard to get to 1-1 with the Bengals and try to take Burrow, and they were shot down at every turn. But to me, that I just can't buy that even the Chargers are sold that this guy's the answer. If they don't make that move to get up there and make sure they get him.
We'll only hear that if he's good. That story will only come out if he's good.
That shows the contrast between the other two teams in the division. The Las Vegas Raiders, Derek Carr has always been a guy picked in the second round that and same with Drew Lock in Denver. When you pick a guy later, there isn't that expectation. If Drew Lock stinks in 2020, Denver is no one. The three of us are not going to look at Denver and be like, wow, you wasted a second-round pick. Holy buckets, right?
No one's calling for John Elway's head.
No one, and that's a great value. If Jalen Hurts doesn't play a snap in Philadelphia, I don't think anybody rightfully can give the Eagles any flack.
Good thing you said rightfully, because there'll be riots in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, they did. I think there is something different when you've already got what's supposed to be your franchise quarterback, right? Sure. If the Rams are taking him, Carson Wentz is there. They seem to get a pass because this is the new Taysom Hill, which is, amazing.
Maybe that, yeah.
Well, the value of the backup quarterback is interesting.
With Locke, with Derek Carr, with guys like that, that to me, we wrote an article about that. I mean, when you look past pick 10 to 32 at the quarterback position is exactly what you described, Soren, which is
no man's land.
She's the only girl left on the dance floor type of thing, right? and that doesn't end up she's got to be your 1-1, as Soren would say. But but after 32, everybody's sort of incentive to pick a quarterback is gone because of the 5th-year option. And when you're picking a guy in the top end of the second round, it's because you actually have evaluated there, and that's a good thing. That's probably a smart move, and we've seen that. If some team would have taken Drew Lock at 10, we would have been we would have ripped them. I have no issue with where the Broncos took him.
I need to know how many weddings a speech is opened up with. She was the last girl left on the dance floor. But that's the point, right? It's that doesn't. You're not marrying.
I was drunk. She was drunk. I mean,
look, magic happened at some point. And what's interesting in listening to both of you guys talk about Justin Herbert and Pat Mahomes is there was, and maybe this is indicative of what we're kind of going through right now, is that there were a lot of excuses made for why Justin Herbert should be taken high, and a lot of excuses made for why Pat Mahomes wouldn't be taken high. And you can leverage those inefficiencies in the market to take advantage, right? And I think the interesting thing about the Chiefs, when people say, well, they didn't actually trade up to 1-1 to get them, and it's more about not being able to. You just can't move up that many picks to get to number 1. The Chargers were in a position where they knew, look, we don't actually need to get to 1 to get our 1-1 guy. But the fact that they didn't make an attempt, or at least there is not one out there to get to 2 or to 3, would lead you to believe that they just had no plan, which I think we talk about a lot is pervasive within the league. Okay, here's the way that I want to ask this kind of one of our wrapping up questions, which is, percentage chance in your mind that the Kansas City Chiefs win the division in 2020?
I would put it, like I said, there are new factors, and how they're going to handle success. I think is real. How teams handle championship success. Not everybody's Michael Jordan, right? Driven to just keep going. So that's an unknown that they can only answer by getting on the field and proving it. But I think it's like 75% because I think the Chiefs have proven that they can win. Andy Reid's proven for years that he can win without Patrick Mahomes. So if Mahomes goes down for a period of games, Chad Henne can win some football games. They can go at least 500 with Chad Henne in there, and probably more like 600 ball with Chad Henne in there. So you can take 2 out of 3, which is what they did with Matt Moore, who was coaching high school football before the season started. Then I think that gives them every reason to believe that they will be good. I mean, the talent is there, the coaching staff is there, and I think it's year 2 of the defense. I think what may end up happening is that the defense ends up carrying more of the load. I think schedule was part of, as George pointed out when we talked about this on my show. Their defensive numbers were buoyed by the fact that they had a weak schedule coming down the stretch. But there was real progress in talking in the Zoom press conferences they're having right now. That's one of the themes that, okay, the foundation has now been laid. Now let's build on that, and they can get maybe a little bit more exotic in what they do and be a little bit more unpredictable now that everybody knows where they're going.
Well, you were spot on there. I expected you to say like 95%. This is how you're good at what you do, because the market has them at minus 350, which is basically right on your implied probability there of winning. And we would actually say that maybe it's a little higher based on our simulations, but like right in the same ballpark there, which I think means we're probably not betting on them to win the division.
Well, and real quick, George, I know you got one, but real quick, that's why like the Chiefs were 6-4. And, I know Eric knows this, that last year they were 6-4, and everyone around town they don't run the ball well enough. They don't stop the ball. This team can't win. I mean, this town was not talking Super Bowl when they were 6-4, and nobody was looking at the fact that they were in their little stretch when they lost to the Titans and the Texans. They were playing without Chris Jones, without their left tackle, without Frank Clark with bad elbows and neck and all the things that were going on with him. They were down a running back. They were down. They were really, really banged up, and they were still just barely losing the teams that would go on to be winning playoff teams. Tyreek Hill was down
5 or 6 games. Sammy Watkins missed a bunch of games.
Yeah. And if that stretch happens at the end and they go into the playoffs like that, or coming down the stretch and there's a key game, and that's the 25% that doesn't go their way.
Proudest moment last season was before that Broncos game. I said that we were talking on the podcast, and I said they should rest Mahomes because of his injury, not take the chance of exacerbating it, because Andy Reid could beat Joe Flacco with Matt Moore. And I was in the Salt Lake City airport doing victory laps in an airport lounge.
And I can remember that week my kids had like a parade or something, and it was the Friday after that Thursday game where Mahomes dislocated his knee. And I'm listening to I'm not paying attention to anything. I'm a bad dad. I'm a terrible dad. I'm listening to Petro's show on my earphones, just like praying that we're all like in this like constant vigil for Patrick Mahomes' knee. And then actually, it ended up turning out fairly well, as far as he only missed a couple weeks. And, I think the only thing I was with that was like when they lost to Tennessee was like really the only time I was kind of like, man, they kind of missed an opportunity on having a good year, but then they just ran the table.
Well, and that 25% variable, part of that is Patrick Mahomes gets hurt. Like he's got to go a little Peyton Manning and start just, dropping to the ground and turtling when the pressure comes around. Like, it's great. You might be able to save this play, but we need you to play all the plays. And he's got to quit being so tough.
His kneecap injury, though, I think made his ankle injury better.
Yes.
Like that was the whole point that George had, was basically, sit out and get your ankle right. Because if you looked at the way they played against Indianapolis, the way they played against Houston, even early on against Denver, like he just couldn't move around. Like they were struggling to beat teams like Detroit, and then they lost a few. And ultimately down the stretch, that run against Tennessee at the end of the first half doesn't happen if his ankle's messed up, and the play, he was under siege the whole game in the Super Bowl. and he was, fairly nimble in that game. The run that he made on 3rd and long to set up the 4th and 1, that like all that stuff doesn't happen, I think, unless he gets hurt. So even though it was a bad thing, it ended up being kind of lucky for them too, ultimately.
I mean, that's such a great point. That's why there's so much variance. He got injured and needed another injury to allow himself to be healthy enough to take them on a Super Bowl run. Like, that's insane. Chances they win the Super Bowl and go back to back.
I mean, what's the math? I've seen, like people confuse favorite with meaning you. If you don't win, you have failed, right? I mean, the math, I'm sure you guys have run it, is probably in the 20% range.
Wow, you're
right?
good. You're good.
That would be my guess.
Which is super high, by the way.
Yeah, and I think the math was probably going to say, the Ravens are 16%, right? And then the Saints, or maybe the Saints or Niners, because they don't have to go. The Chiefs and Ravens have to go through each other. Maybe those two.
We haven't done it with Jameis Winston in there yet, but yeah probably.
It'll look real different. But and you haven't done it with assessing the Saints hating their quarterback, right? That's a whole new dynamic that emerged yesterday with the comments of Drew Brees. So what's the chemistry going to be like down there? But there's so many variables. I will say this: the one thing that I kept saying, like you talk about your victory lap about what you said, I kept saying as people were nitpicking the Chiefs and the Ravens run the ball and the Chiefs can't stop the run. I said, they have beat the Ravens the last 2 times, and I think the Ravens are better, and I think they're scary, and I think they might be able to be the 2000 Ravens. Better offensively, right? Not so defensively oriented. But I love their offseason. I love their draft. I love their moves. But, I've seen that movie, man. The Ravens are 1995 Marty Schottenheimer. They're 1997 Marty Schottenheimer. Man, unless you have a quarterback that can pull it out of the fire at some point in the playoff run, and so we can crunch the numbers and what it means on a per-play basis. But the reality is there are some plays that mean more than others, right? As we know, you get later when the score and 5 yards aren't 5 yards. 5 yards on 3rd and 4 or more than 5 yards on 3rd and 10, right? All those things come into it. Well, being able to move the ball and make the plays when you can't run, that's the true mark of an elite quarterback. There's going to be a time in the playoffs where you can't run. The run's not an option. You have to throw. And do you have a quarterback that can do that? I'm not saying Lamar Jackson can't. But what we've seen so far against the Tennessee Titans, he had to do it. He put up a lot of numbers. And from 20 to 20, he could get them going. And when it got close, he didn't have the prerequisite or the necessary skills, at least at that point, to make those big plays. So everything we look at, like the Chiefs probably deserve a little bit more than that 20% because I think they'll get in there with the Ravens. The Ravens can't knock them out because Patrick Mahomes won't let you get knocked out. And then they have a knockout punch of their own, which is what happened to the 49ers. The 49ers were the better team for 45, 50 minutes of that game, but there's a puncher's chance. And that punch is Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and they went for the knockout and got it.
All right. You need to stop talking about the Super Bowl.
That's so important in that, like, the year, I think back to like 2010 and the year that the Packers they had a ton of injuries and they went 10-6 and they head into the playoffs as the 6th seed. And you look back at their season, and they never trailed by more than a touchdown the whole year. They went 10-6, right? And they never lost by more than 4. And so sometimes, like, those characteristics are so much more important than wins and losses and things like that. And Mahomes is very similar. And then, granted, they have trailed by more. They trailed by 24 against Houston, but they've in his tenure as the quarterback of the Chiefs, they've never lost a game by more than 1 score.
Yeah. Andy Reid hasn't lost since the game down in Dallas in 2017.
Right. Me and George, that was our lock of the week that week.
Yeah. Andy Reid keeps you on your feet. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes keep you on your feet into the 12th round with a chance to knock the opposition out. I mean, that's what it is. So you're going to have to fight all 12 rounds, play all 60 minutes to beat the Chiefs.
All right. A couple of quick ones here. Best barbecue place in Kansas City is?
Joe's Kansas City Barbecue. Not only is the barbecue phenomenal, championship caliber competition barbecue team for years before they started opening restaurants. They haven't expanded. They own their 3 restaurants, and they don't do it. You can also get it at joeskc.com, by the way. Love them. They're a sponsor of mine. You can get it sent anywhere around, but they don't do anything until it's absolutely perfect. Also voted #1 fries in Kansas City. And I will tell you, the onion rings are spectacular as well. The Rocket Pig sandwich is my personal favorite.
If anybody wants to know how big time Soren is in Kansas City, when I came back from the AFC Championship game, I came to his house, and he had Joe's isn't open on Sundays. Is that right?
That's right.
They made you Joe's for that day, despite not being open. So the best barbecue place in Kansas City makes special considerations for our friend Soren Petro.
Yeah, and I can attest. I sought out Joe's Barbecue when I was in Kansas City.
Go to the gas station, 47th and Mission, the one in the gas station,
and it's good. It's really good. Do you have any quarantine guilty pleasures that you would like to share with us? I'm looking to pick up a few.
Before the obvious, the booze. I mean, I know you've got your tequila and your wine. I mean, do I need to give you some whiskeys? You know,
why don't you give us some whiskeys here?
Well, I'll tell you, bang for the buck, Jim Beam Black. Very good. I'm a big fan there. That I think that's kind of the go-to, right? Because we're in it for the long haul. We're running a marathon here, right? Not a sprint when it comes to beating COVID. So great. That's a great marathon whiskey. Let's put it that way. The Jim Beam Black. But I have taken up. You guys actually got me going on Tiger King. Listening to you guys. I know that seems like 5 years ago now, but you were the first one. Like, the void was there. What do I watch without sports? Because I'm one of those guys that, like, if I'm not watching sports, I feel like I might miss something, and so I'm not doing my job. But now there's no sports, so I had to find a void. You guys sent me to Tiger King, which then sent me down the road of binge watching other shows, from The Expanse to Ozark. Ozark was fantastic.
Ozark's good.
Breaking Bad. I hadn't seen Breaking Bad. So I have now become when the work is done, like 12:30 to like 3 binge watch fiend. And at some point when I go back to being a respectable member of the community, I'm going to have to break that habit.
I am still looking to pick up more of the binge watching, but I'm getting there. I have some news for you the next time I come on your show, which is actually the last part here. We've been soliciting feedback from our listeners, and we got this one in, and so I thought I'd read it to you because this is a hat tip, a thank you. So he says, I first heard George and Eric on Soren Petro's show, which is, by the way, the program, Sports Radio 810, and they quickly became my favorite guests. Their conversations are excellent and smart. It doesn't feel like snobby snap, blah, 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 blah. The point is, someone heard us on your show, came and watched our show, so we thank you. It is a highlight, honestly, of my week whenever I can come on the show. It's a blast. I look forward to all three of us post-pandemic sharing some great barbecue in Kansas City. That would make me very happy.
Yeah, listen, and as you know, if you ever come to Kansas City, you can stay at my place, because Eager just invited himself, walked right in, picked his room, moved one of my kids.
How bad you must have been, because the Ravens were the Ravens were losing by 2 scores, and I text you, I go, Petro, can I come to the AFC Championship game? And you're like, sure, you can stay with me. I'm like, great. And then the next day, it's 1:30 in the afternoon, and the Houston's up 24-0 against. I'm like, did I just jinx this entire thing?
Yeah.
But ultimately ended up working out, and that was a lot of fun, and what a great experience. And
I just can't believe
sponsors were so happy.
I can't believe, with your directional sense and ability to tell time, or inability to tell time, that you made it to his place on time.
Yeah,
I would have figured you showed up after the game.
Hey, sidebar on that, he didn't necessarily make it on time. He arrived. I got people together. I'm like, hey, Eager's coming to town. Let's get together and we'll have a little festivity. So we go. I get like 9-10 guys together to hang out, and he picks a flight that lands at like midnight. So he rolls into the bar, and then we're down to like 3 of us, and he rolls in at like 12:40 in the morning. At the bar. So that's the kind of great timing. Eric Eager's timing sucks. Let me just tell you that. All around, he is not good at it. Don't have him plan out the corporate outing, because it'll be a train wreck.
We're gonna have the next time you come on, we're gonna do a whole thing on stories with Eric. It's gonna be a blast. I look forward to that. Soren, thank you for coming on, man. Thank you for dropping the groceries off to come hang out with us. Always appreciate it. Stay safe out there, brother.
Listen, let me say about you guys. Number one, I appreciate the kind words, but your show is fantastic. It's my number one podcast. I never listen to another podcast unless I've fully digested the Pro Football Focus. It is truly my number one podcast. What you guys do is great. You guys are real. Keep rocking what you're doing. And thanks so much for having me on. Let me be a part of it.
Appreciate it, brother. Soren
Thanks,
Petro joining us there. That was fantastic. All righty. So we are wrapping up here. I have a couple of announcements. So on Monday, we are going to do a all listeners questions show. So just as you guys have been throwing in 5-star reviews and we've been reading questions, we've been picking one a week. We're just going to pick a bunch, and we're going to do that all show on Monday. So 5-star review, a question, a take, an opinion, whatever it is. Bring your best up. A great recipe. I'll be throwing those in there. Great places to eat in different places. Make those happen. And one last shout out. I got a lot of really cool feedback from people wishing my sister well on her surgery. It went well. It's her birthday tomorrow.
Happy
birthday to her. She's going to like the fact that Eric said happy birthday and not the fact that I brought it up. I'll just point that out. So thank you to all you guys for hanging out with us. Stay safe, be well, and donate to a cause that matters. We'll see you guys.